Good morning. It's good to be here and to be here with you. I'm Sarah McNeil, and I'm a member of the UU Fellowship of Clemson's Worship Associate Team. Each week, this community comes together to participate in worship, music, and reflection. This is where we seek to have our hearts opened and our imaginations fired. This is the place that reminds us that we are deeply connected to one another and all living things. Even though our building is closed, we gather together for weekly online worship. At 11:30 on Sunday mornings, we also gather for social connection and the sharing of joys and concerns in our Zoom meeting. Please join us. If you're joining us for the first time this morning, welcome. This fellowship is a religious community grounded in the heritage and principles of Unitarian Universalism. We seek to create loving community, inspire joy and spiritual growth, and support courageous action. All are welcome, regardless of religious background, political persuasion, ethnicity, age, ability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression. If you have a desire to explore questions of truth and meaning and are respectful of our diversity of people and beliefs, you found kindred spirits here. If you'd like more information about this fellowship or Unitarian Universalism, please see information about us on our website, uufc.org. If you're interested in getting our weekly newsletter so you can get connected to our community for online social events, our weekly sharing of joys and concerns, and our collective efforts to support local social justice work, please reach out to the office by the email on our website. Here are some announcements for the week. The first yummy announcement is the upcoming Valentine's Day bake sale is your chance to purchase some of those delectable goodies you remember from our social hour hospitality teams. Already 15 members have signed up to bake cookies, bars, muffins, fudge, and mini cakes. The selection list will be sent out in a special email in early February with ordering and payment details. Check the weekly connection for Kathy Crane's contact info to join the team of bakers or ask questions. The usual meetings will be available, their links will be available in your weekly connection. Bingo on Thursday, social time after services on Sunday, the Zoom meditation on Mondays, coffee with Christina on Wednesdays. Also, a new class, UU 101, begins February 14th. And also on February 14th, a virtual chocolate tasting at 7:30 p.m. There's also the new parenting group and a new covenant group focusing on decentralization of whiteness. Let us begin worship with these opening words by Cynthia Landrum. Let us worship with our eyes and our ears and our fingertips, said Kenneth Patton. Never has it been more true. We turn our eyes to screens, our fingertips touch keyboards and fiddle with radio dials, our ears turn to listen to speakers. Across the waves, across the town, the state, even the country, we gather together. Let us worship with the opening of all the windows of our beings, with the full outstretching of our spirits, Patton continued with words familiar in our hymnal. Today we stretch out not arms to clasp one another, but truly the outstretching of our spirits. We stretch out our connection of caring, of courage, of compassion. We stretch out our spirits to bind ourselves in religious community in this new way. Life comes together with singing and laughter, with tears and confiding, with a rising wave too great to be held in the mind and heart and body. To those who have fallen in love with life, says Patton, we come together to share those joys and sorrows that we might know one another and be present to the passing of our days, our trials, our triumphs. We bear witness to the fullness of our lives, no longer shared in one building, but held lovingly across the distance. Let us worship and let us learn to love, Patton concludes. May it be so.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Christina Branham Martin, and we come together and worship together today by lighting this chalice and sharing the words of affirmation spoken by this fellowship each week. We gather together in a spirit of love. With justice as our guide, this is our chosen covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another. And we also come together as a spirit of community in which we find common strength and common purpose. And we light these candles of joys and concerns together. The first of which I light in celebration of all of those who have had vaccines or have appointments upcoming. These vaccines represent our hopes for health, for vitality, for safety, and for coming together soon. May it be so. I also light a candle for the incoming leadership of the fellowship, the new board, the new committee chairs, the new committee members. Your passion and energy for the work of this fellowship bring the mission and vision of this fellowship alive. There are some in our community that are having surgery or getting medical treatment. We light this candle for you. May your healing be swift, and may you know that we are caring for you. I also light this candle in honor of Holocaust Remembrance Day. Our own Mael Berger Afragala wrote, "May we flood the world with love, tolerance, and respect so that history may not repeat itself." And I light this final candle in the knowledge that some of the most deeply felt sorrows and exuberantly felt joys lie unspoken in some hearts here today. We are a single, separate people linked into community by love and the need for our search for truth. What touches one touches all. We live by our shared concern and our gathered love. We are grateful for these sacred connections and our opportunity to be together today.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Not My Idea, a book about whiteness, written and illustrated by Anastasia Higginbotham. When grown-ups tried to hide scary things from kids, oh no, not again. What? Mom, what not again? It's usually because they're scared too. Who is that with their hands up? Why is that policeman screaming at him? They want to bury the truth. You don't need to worry about this. You're safe. Understand? No. Our family is kind to everyone. We don't see color. Deep down, we all know. Color matters. Skin color makes a difference in how the world sees you and in how you see the world. I want to bring my aunt a gift. This will only take a minute. It makes a difference in how much trouble seems to find you or let you be. In stores, in cars, on sidewalks, at school, your skin color affects the most ordinary daily experiences, including which neighborhoods welcome you. So relieved you got here safely. Well, why wouldn't we? The protests. They're blocking the road. You may get the message that racism is happening only to black and brown people. Racism is a white person's problem, and we are all caught up in it. I can't watch the news. That police officer was just doing his job. Mostly by refusing to look at it. Come away from the TV now. Look, I made your favorite. But you can face this. Understanding the truth takes courage, especially a painful truth about your own people, your own family. Are you all right? Even people you love may behave in ways that show they think they are the good ones. Racism was not your idea. You don't need to defend it. You can bring your curiosity to learn about it and to see that it's true. You can find out more about our shared history. In the United States of America, white people have committed outrageous crimes against black people for 400 years. All along, every step of the way, people who love justice and love each other have been fighting back. Many white people did things they never should have done. Denied opportunity, denied housing, denied voting rights. Many other white people failed to see the problem with this, exploited the love and labor of black women. These choices put wealth and power into white hands, homes, and neighborhoods. Some white people joined the leaders of black liberation. Here, the word liberation means love and freedom. People like the Grimke sisters, Julian Bond and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Nina Simone, Catholic nuns and other fellow marchers in Selma, John Lewis, and Colin Kaepernick. Racism is still happening. It keeps changing and keeps being the same. And yet, just being here, alive in this moment, you have a chance to care about this, to connect. But connecting means opening, and opening sometimes feels like breaking. Mom, I don't feel good. Uh-oh, should I pull over? I need to know what's going on. Why didn't anyone teach me real history? What are you talking about? I do see color. I see yours, mine, and everybody's. You can't hide what's right in front of me. I know that what that police officer did was wrong. Go with your instincts on this one. Racial justice is possible. But only if we're honest with each other and ourselves. I see a playground over there. Want to get some air? Yes! Your history's not all written yet. What do you want it to say? The end.
Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. These words by Reverend Ashley Horan are called, "Another World is Possible." Another world is possible. We say it again and again, even when the proof lies somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond our reach, beyond our imagination. This is our faith. Another world is possible. Not somewhere else, another world, another lifetime, but here and now, for us and for all. Another world is possible. There is no single path towards that world. No one strategy or approach that will restore balance, heal brokenness, sow wholeness, or free creation. There are many routes towards liberation, toward freedom. But the abundance of options does not absolve us of the responsibility of acting. Another world is possible. The call, the duty of each moment in history is to discern who we are and what can we bring with humility, integrity, and faith. What is the context? And how can we address it with agility, resilience, and skill? What is the vision? And how can we realize it with accountability, relationship, joy? Another world is possible. In this time of despair, of fear, of collapse, this time that is both like every other era and like no other time in history, it is audacious to declare our faith and to commit our work to a world that is more free, more just, more whole. But we are an audacious people in good company, with many kin who are ready to show up and work hard and stay humble and make friends and hold the vision, starting here, now, today, with us and persevering however long it takes until that other world is not only possible, but another world is here. Amen.
Last year, I had the distinct privilege of attending several workshops put on by the Clemson Area Pledge to End Racism. At that time, I met Stacy, Keelor, and Markus. They are our speakers today. Stacy, Keelor, and Markus moved to the upstate upon retiring 4 years ago and enjoy a happy and fulfilling life on Lake Keowee. As members of St. Mark United Methodist Church in Seneca, they have led the church and society team, a social justice ministry, since its inception in 2018. In 2019, the church and society team conducted a well-attended series entitled Racism and Its Impacts. Subsequently, Stacy and Danny were recruited to support a nascent UUFC effort, the Clemson Area Pledge to End Racism. Given the ongoing scourge of racial inequity, Stacy and Danny continue to stay deeply committed and active to bring about necessary change. We welcome them.
Paraphrased from Teachings on Love by Thich Nhat Hanh. Practicing love meditation is greater than all other virtuous actions combined. Practicing love meditation is like digging deep into the ground until we reach the purest water. But we must not think that love meditation is only an act of imagination. We imagine our love like a pure white cloud. A true cloud produces rain. We have to observe whether our mind of love is present in our actual contact with others. Practicing love meditation in the sitting position is only the beginning.
Thanks to Kathy Crane for inviting us to be with you in your beloved community. Stacy and I met Kathy 2 years ago when she and her husband Gordon participated in a series of workshops at our church, St. Mark United Methodist. More on that later. Kathy is a loving, caring, and kind soul, a tribute to her faith. We sincerely appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about our involvement in the racial justice space, and would like to offer 3 observations that inform how we do this important work. First, anything great that has ever happened in this world is the result of someone who moves from imagining to doing. And second, more often than not, it is hard to move from imagining to doing. And third, it is possible to move from imagining to doing when faith, fortitude, and focus are embraced. Now, many of you are likely familiar with the messages we want to impart today, so we hope they will be welcome reminders. And we know that the Unitarian Universalist Association has abundant resources and a long history of being champions of social justice issues, particularly when it comes to racial equity. With our hearts and minds open, it is impossible not to bear witness to this unique point in history and to feel the urgent and pressing need to do something. We may be preaching to the choir, but ultimately, the challenge for all of us is anything but business as usual. As we just said, anything great that has ever happened in this world is the result of someone who moves from imagining to doing. Examples abound of familiar names who have done the work of doing. Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, Malala Yousafzai, Rosa Parks, Angela Davis, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Colin Kaepernick, and Greta Thunberg, to name a few. Here's another example of someone who may surprise you. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. First, he imagined something, a different, a better world in the year 2265, some 244 years from now. And then he devoted his life to doing something by creating a wildly popular television show that depicted our planet free from war, poverty, and racism. It was the kiss seen round the world on November 22nd, 1968, when Star Trek fans saw Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhuru lock lips. It was the first ever interracial kiss on television. For context, the U.S. Supreme Court had declared interracial marriage legal just a little more than a year earlier. Talk about boldly going where no one had gone before. In another episode, the crew of the Enterprise encounter 2 people from a planet where racial prejudice is not based on black or white skin color, because everyone is half black and half white, split down the middle. For them, race-based superiority and inferiority are determined by which side of your body happens to be black or white. A millennia of race wars on their planet, stoked by hate between the 2 factions, eventually decimate the entire population. This thought-provoking episode still has fans talking about it, some 52 years later, and a sampling of their comments on YouTube says it all. Quote, "This episode was pure genius. Gene Roddenberry was really a philosopher and a social activist in the guise of an entertainer." Quote, "People who think this episode is heavy-handed, the moral is not just racism is bad, it's about the absurdity of racism and its self-destructiveness, something certain people still don't understand. Now let's consider two recent stories about people who went from imagining to doing. Jose Andres, the Spanish-American chef and restaurateur, imagined that he could find a way to feed people impacted by natural disasters. So he created the World Central Kitchen in response to the 2010 Haiti earthquake. Years later, in September 2017, when Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico, Jose arrived on one of the first planes allowed to land and set out building a network of chefs, kitchens, and volunteers. And after just 2 months on an island where most were without power, World Central Kitchen had mobilized 20,000 volunteers working across 24 kitchens and 7 food trucks to serve more than 2 million meals, far exceeding what any other NGOs or the US government were able to provide. And during the pandemic, the World Central Kitchen has dispersed over $105 million back into the US economy by purchasing 10 million meals from independent restaurants and delivering them to families in need. In the wake of George Floyd's tragic murder, PayPal CEO Dan Schulman imagined taking a united stand to, quote, do the necessary work to dismantle racism in all its forms. And then he set about doing by pledging $530 million to strengthen Black communities. That brings us to share our recent experiences of being called to move from imagining to doing. Shortly after the tragic Charlottesville, Virginia Unite the Right rally on August 12, 2017, one of our St. Mark pastors delivered a blistering sermon, a call to action, you might say. We imagined answering the call and approached the pastor asking, what can we do? She encouraged us to join our church's new Church and Society team, a United Methodist social justice ministry with a 100-year-plus history of activism across a wide variety of issues. And despite the fact that Stacy and I were far from understanding the depth and breadth of racial injustice and the role we play as privileged white people, we led with our hearts and the conviction to do something. So it wasn't long before we committed to help plan and conduct a 5-part workshop entitled Racism and Its Impacts. Our efforts were supported by all 12 Church and Society team members and a complement of local subject matter experts. And while most of the nearly 200 workshop participants were from St. Mark, other racial justice seekers from the community, like Kathy and Gordon, joined in. An auspicious start on the journey from imagining to doing. Fortunately, doing often begets doing something else. And shortly after the St. Mark program, we were approached to get involved in the Clemson Area Pledge to End Racism, a nascent UUFC initiative. We jumped into this interfaith effort along with a number of other talented and committed people and conducted our first Living the Pledge to End Racism workshop in early 2020.
It can be blissfully comforting to imagine a world free of racial injustice. We have all heard imaginings like these. Imagine if we could all just get along. Imagine if we could all just move forward and put the past behind us. Imagine if we could all just see beyond race. With each passing day, it becomes more certain that to achieve a world, or even just a locality, free of racial injustice, imagining is simply not enough. We have no choice but to move forward doing, and now. Shortly after the November election, your own Reverend Christina suggested that the road to healing requires us to lean into our pain, to befriend it, perhaps that vulnerable state is just the bridge we need to cross to go from imagining to doing. Regrettably, time after time, we have all been misled to believe that we are already living in a post-racial state. But in reality, that belief is a figment of our imagination. We must evoke today the challenge of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as he led the 1963 March on Washington. He said, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action." Nearing the end of his life in the mid-'80s, James Baldwin's words in the documentary film James Baldwin, The Price of the Ticket, must also be recycled for today. He said, "What is it you want me to reconcile myself to? You always told me it takes time. It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's and my sister's time, my niece's and my nephew's time. How much time do you want for your progress?" Our next observation was that more often than not, it is hard to move from imagining to doing. Imagining is easy, but yields nothing by itself. Doing is hard, and for many reasons. Living with the status quo is even harder, and will become increasingly so. Therefore, this moment demands that those of us with privilege, namely those of us who are white, need to lead the way, and we need to do something, no matter how hard. It is only through our individual doing that we will have the desired cumulative effects. But why is doing so hard for us? No question about it, the easiest thing to do to dismantle racism is nothing. But for those of us who are working to move past our ignorance, denial, our gut instincts, and discomfort, we have no choice but to move with great intensity from imagining to doing. Doing is hard because when it comes to dismantling racism, as white people, we are finding our way. We are not easily able to accept our racist ways. We lack the capacity to do the necessary introspective work. We're not sure what action to take, and we are unclear on the cost that we are willing to pay. We are not aligned with other white people on what to do, and we are not sure how to do it. We're not sure how to talk about it, and we are bound to make mistakes. Our fragility gets in the way. We are subject to the criticisms of other white people. We get accused of virtue signaling. We cannot be the authority on our impact. We are discouraged by apathy in people of color. We want support and acknowledgement from people of color. And we expect people of color to tell us what to do. Well, in our efforts, mine and Danny's, our efforts to participate in a local police task force and a sheriff citizen police academy, to develop and implement a grant-funded anti-racism digital resources for youth project, to attempt to get traction for an equal justice initiative community remembrance project, and to lead the executive committee of the Clemson Area Pledge to End Racism. In all of those efforts, we have experienced all of those so-called hardships. In our more than occasional frustration, Danny and I remind ourselves that these hardships are nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the centuries of oppression, across all aspects of life as experienced by people of color. As we look for inspiration from people like Ijeoma Oluo, who says in her book, So You Want to Talk About Race, you have to get over the fear of facing the worst in yourself. You should instead fear unexamined racism. Fear the thought that right now you could be contributing to the oppression of others and you don't even know it. But do not fear those who bring that oppression to light. Do not fear the opportunity to do better. Doing is hard when faced with a temptation to ask ourselves if our doing will even have an impact. Every day we fight the urge to give in to the voices, black, brown, and white alike, the voices that try to insist. Racism certainly won't be dismantled in our generation. Our systems and institutions have become too complicated to fix in the near term. This is the work of younger generations. Even Robin DiAngelo, author of White Fragility, has said, it takes years of experience and study and mistake-making and trust-building to help a group move in constructive ways. At the end of the day, Danny and I simply do not want to accept that the arc of the moral universe is long, even if that is true. Finally, doing is hard because it requires an internal and external focus. The internal doing is our lifelong journey to understand our whiteness, the fragility it invites, the privilege it affords, the impact our whiteness has on people of color, and how to use our privilege to change the culture to dismantle racism. The external doing offers more opportunities than we can possibly imagine, and the discussion of those opportunities and problems to solve is beyond the scope of this brief sermon. So instead, let us turn to Ijeoma Oluo for words of wisdom once again. She says, act now, because people are dying now in this unjust system. How many lives have been ground up by racial prejudice and hate? How many opportunities have we already lost? Act and talk and learn and mess up and learn some more and act again and do better. We have to do this all at once. We have to learn and fight at the same time, because people have been waiting far too long for their chance to live as equals in this society.
And finally, Stacy and I have found it is possible to move from imagining to doing when faith, fortitude, and focus are embraced. Allow us to share a few passages of Scripture to illustrate how our faith as Christians helps us move from imagining to doing. Quote, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. It's Philippians 4:13, the Apostle Paul. And note that Paul doesn't say, I can imagine all things. We are never alone during each and every moment of our life. For us, Jesus Christ is a real, constant presence. And since we believe he is God, all-loving, all-powerful, we have every conviction in the veracity of that verse. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. In Hebrews 11:1, we hear, now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Our faith is central to who Stacy and I are, and we are sure of what we hope for, that a more fair, just, and equitable world will someday come to pass. And by the grace of God, we will do something to help make that happen. How does your faith inspire you to go from imagining to doing? Then, with faith in hand, we turn to one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, fortitude, to help stay the course. Fortitude is the strength that enables us to encounter adversity with courage. St. Thomas Aquinas tells us, with the gift of fortitude, we overcome our fear and are willing to take risks as a follower of Jesus Christ. A person with courage is willing to stand up for what is right in the sight of God, even if it means accepting rejection, verbal abuse, or even physical harm and death. The gift of courage allows people the firmness of mind that is required both in doing good and in enduring evil, especially with regard to goods or evil that are difficult, just like Joan of Arc did. How will you find fortitude to prevail when doing gets hard? Finally, Stacy and I strive to focus, which can be particularly hard to do with all the busyness life brings. One way to focus is pretty straightforward. When we examine our checkbooks and our calendars, they tell us where our focus is. When we realize that we have 168 hours in each week, time magically emerges. What we Google also reveals where our focus is. Try Googling articles, organizations, videos, etc. that have a nexus to racial justice. Focused searches can identify opportunities for doing. How will you find a couple of hours a week to do something for racial justice? And then how will you spend that time? Stacy and I are grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. And as we move together towards racial justice, let us remember that anything great that has ever happened in this world has been the result of someone who moves from imagining to doing. More often than not, it is hard to move from imagining to doing. Yet, it is possible to move from imagining to doing when faith, fortitude, and focus are embraced. Our parting prayer is that we do all the wondrous things we can imagine to help make our world a better place, a more equitable place for all of God's children. Amen.
We've come to the end of our worship, and we now extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace, my friends.